Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, and I'm joined today by Bernadette Jones. Bernadette is co founder of Visionova HR Consulting, where she helps organizations lead at the intersection of compliance and culture. She has more than 2 decades of experience in HR leadership, coaching, and consulting, and she serves on the Northern California SHRM Professional Development and Conference Committee, and chairs the NorCal SHRM DEIB Committee. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Bernadette.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So, anybody who's been in people leadership for a hot minute has been in the situation we're really talking about today. There's a problem in the organization. Leadership recognizes it as a problem, but for whatever reason, they don't do anything about it. And of course, sometimes it just festers into a much larger issue. So let's start there. Why do you think that happens? Why don't leaders address these people concerns or just issues that they see that may be people issues when they first see them?
That's a really good question. And I think there are a few reasons why that happens. And one of them is the big thing is avoidance. We avoid things that are uncomfortable, the things we're feeling challenged about. And so many of us have not had training on how to give feedback that people can hear, and how to have those difficult conversations. And so we push it to the side, hoping everything will correct itself. And of course, as leaders, we're wearing multiple hats, especially small business owners that don't have an HR department, and they're tasked with the HR function and they don't have time for it. And so it festers, like you said, and put on the back burner. And the next thing you know, it's a huge issue.
I think that confidence, and especially if it's a thorny issue, maybe you just hope it's going to go away, or the having the confidence to address something the right way. So they want to get information, and sometimes we want so much information about what to
Yeah.
that time passes, and especially in like sexual harassment investigations, you can't let it the complainant comes forward and you can't let it sit there for a week two
Mm.
before you do something about it, because that complainant is expecting you to do something, and there's certain expectations under the law that you respond promptly, and especially if it's some hostile environment or something like that. You don't want to leave this person in that situation, or even if they just perceive it to be a hostile environment and you don't do anything
Mhm.
about it, you're not doing the organization any favors, and you're still not meeting your requirements. So I think there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's often by the time I get called to come in and do some consulting or some investigation, it's already been too long and it's festered. And I wonder sometimes if they think, is it worth paying Coffee to come in and do this versus maybe, and then by the time they've made the decision to make the financial commitment, they've already missed the boat. So,
That's true. And so because of that, you want to have a plan, because you're going to anticipate eventually you're going to have one of these situations where it's a people problem. It may be a system problem that's causing people issues. And so the first question we really want to determine is it a people issue? Is it really a people issue? Is it a process issue? Or even if it's a leadership issue where we just are not making a decision to move forward. And so that can cause additional problems that may be people problems, or again, like I mentioned, process. So sometimes it's not knowing where to start. And I think that's the first place to start. What really is going on here? And that's that triage, the T in triage that we talked about.
so you've got an interesting process that I really like the metaphor, a medical metaphor, like somebody hits the emergency room and the first thing they do is triage you. I mean, if you're bleeding out of your body, it's going to be higher. Triage is higher, more critical than if you have sniffles or a broken finger or something. So talk through, what does that triage process look like if you're a leader and there's an issue? How severe and how important and urgent it is?
So one way to do that is in that triage process is looking at whatever is going on. If we think it's a people problem, we want to determine that for sure, but we want to see who's being impacted. Is it the culture that's impacted and maybe there's low morale? Is it a compliance issue that may need to be fixed? Is happening here? And oftentimes, what we'll see is the system issues may create a number of what we would describe as people problems. And we want to look at the frequency. So if you have three people that have a similar complaint, then more than likely it's a system problem. It's
Right.
not a difficult employee. And so the first looking at how critical is it when we're talking about compliance and people waving words around like hostile environment, sexual harassment, discrimination. Those are issues that you want to get on top of quickly. Whereas some other problem that may not be as critical, you want to watch it. Maybe there might be a little conflict where a couple people may not be getting along. Okay, that may be something to watch and coach. But those critical areas where it's destroying culture or it's impacting compliance and legal issues. Those are critical issues. That's your red flag. Got to jump on it right away.
Right. We've got an OSHA issue. We're not going to wait around to see if that happens again, things like that. But even those small issues, those personality conflicts, they can be like a little splinter in can get infected. And next thing you're having to go in and have it excised or even cut your finger off or something. So I don't want managers to ever think that you can just ignore. If it seems small, you can just ignore it, because that's when those are the ones that sneak up on you and snowball.
Yes.
So how do you dig into, what does it look like when you dig into those root causes? What questions do you ask in those cases?
So those root causes you want to ask. Is it attendance, performance? What is the conflict about? Oftentimes that conflict is a symptom of something bigger.
Right.
Maybe the conflict is around responsibilities in the job. Who's responsible for that? And there's not clarity around that. So different employees are having conflict around those kinds of things. So it's important to figure that out and to say, how can we address this conflict while it's small? It's not something like our legal or compliance issues, but it could definitely turn into that pretty quickly. So we want to make sure that if we look at the symptoms and then we address exactly what's going on.
A lot of times it's just like alignment. You think this is your job. You think it's my job. It's not written down anywhere whose job it is, or have an expectation. There are a lot of managers out there who think you should just be able to read their minds. And so they get frustrated with the employee. And rather than just address this one issue and solve it, everything this employee does now is wrong. And they're this and that, or vice versa. The employee doesn't understand what the role is or doesn't like the role. And it's all about their manager rather than they're either suited for it or not. And so those things but they can snowball if you don't address them. But that's icky for a lot of people, right? Having challenging conversations and asking more questions rather than just going straight to an answer and let's get this over with.
Right. And determining what the issue is without actually triaging it. So we had spoken earlier, and I was telling you about a perfect example I had of this was one of my clients' CEO. She called me and she said, Bernadette, we've got a problem. I've got this difficult employee and I think she's going to sue us. And I'm like, okay, so tell me what's going on. And so I found out that this employee was complaining about a interaction she was having with another employee outside of her workspace. And when I found out been complaining about this issue for months, she complained to her manager, went on leave and didn't address it. Then she applied to the administrator, was an avoider. He didn't address it. And so now she's saying this is a hostile work environment. And she's using all those terms that trigger lawsuit. And so what we did is like, what's going on here? Who's been impacted? What is the documentation? Have you talked about the situation? And what we found out is this employee who was difficult had been there for years, and she had taken on a role that wasn't hers voluntarily, because the outsourced consultant stopped doing it. So she took on this role, didn't change the job description, wasn't noted. So now she's got a new administrator, didn't have any of this, that this really wasn't her job. And now they're butting heads. And her frustration was around the fact that I'm doing this, I don't have to do it, and nobody's recognizing it. So what we did is we corrected the process. We brought clarity to a process that was not clear. Whose responsibility is it? And how is this job to be done? And once we did that, and clarified the process and put that in place, the difficult employee disappeared.
She's not difficult, right?
She was a really good employee.
Right. The employee who steps up and I've had those. I've been really blessed by a lot of those over the years in my companies, and they fix stuff, but sometimes they don't document that they're doing it. And so if you're thinking, okay, these are the tasks they're working on, but some of these seem to be, and you don't ask the right questions, suddenly you're like, what is going on? Why aren't you getting this done? And they're like, well, I've just got a lot going on. And maybe they don't say, well, you remember I picked this up, or you don't know that I picked this up. And so we just don't have good communication. And sometimes that's just where I think having that third party come in and just ask a few questions, emotion or personalities involved and all of that.
Yes. And that is so true. So the emotional part of that is what got in the way. She was emotional because he didn't want to address this problem. And so then the CEO, she gets brought into it. She has no clue what's going on. All she knows is here's an employee that's saying hostile work environment, and she's seeing her as a difficult employee. And so all that institutional knowledge around the transfer of roles and duties, that was lost. These were new people who had no clue about that. And the employee, I don't even think she realized that nobody knows that you picked this up voluntarily. That happened a couple years ago, and the folks that are there now have no clue.
And they've got a 4-year-old job description, right? They're not looking if they've got one at all, right? So.
Exactly.
Well, at
Yes.
least it was good in this situation that this reached out to you, but because I can't tell you how many times I see on, especially social media HR, which is always a trash fire, right? But
Hmm.
where they just managers are immediately saying, "This is what's happening. How do I?" And that's in almost every state is really a pretty loose at will state. And so unless you're dealing, but the underlying, you don't go through. Okay, what are the protected class issues here? How do
Hmm.
they what have we done previously? What are we, even if we have no intention, age, race, sex, national origin, religion, any of those, or none, if we don't at least consider what's going on here with those, we may look making a decision for a reason other than this employee's just a pain in the rear end. uh, and so we need to go through a process, right, and figure it out. Plus, you don't want to lose a great because you don't
Exactly.
understand what the issue is. So, and
Mhm.
really, none of us are reliable narrators of our own stories, right? So
Mhm.
everybody's got a story, and you start listening to stories sometimes, and they get in your of really
Yes.
understanding what's going on.
This is really true. And in California in particular, we are at will state. And
But you're probably the least at will state of all the at
we
will
are.
states.
It's
So
at will, but as long as what you're doing is not illegal based on a protected
mhm.
category. But it's hard to prove that it's not if you don't have documentation. If you've not had conversations around performance, behavior, whatever that is. Because what happens is if a person is terminated or disciplined and they have no clue why that's happening, they're going to tell themselves, like you talked about
Mhm.
stories, you're going to tell yourself a story based on your own lived experience as to why that's happening. So for me, as an example, if that happens to me, my story is going to be that's probably happening because I'm a woman and they're mostly men here, or because I'm over 40. All these stories we tell ourselves when we don't have an answer based on our lived,
Right.
which may or may not be accurate. And
Right.
that's the challenge. So when a complaint is filed, how do you prove that this was an at will termination? It was based on performance or behavior. If you have not had
Right.
around that, that's documented. So in California, if you don't have that documentation, it's going to be very difficult to say this was just an at will termination. It wasn't based on the story that I told because that's my story and that's what I felt because I wasn't told anything different. So it's so important to be clear and have those conversations, even though they're difficult.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. For many employers, any review of a candidate's social media profile is taboo. And I'll admit that I spent many years trying to talk employers out of social media searches for most positions. But in a world where almost everyone is online and some people are definitely showing their true character in their social media posts, I don't think employers can afford to ignore it any longer. Within the confines of Title VII and other anti-discrimination laws, candidates' off-duty conduct, including how they conduct themselves on social media, may be relevant. For some positions, threatening, coercive, or bigoted online behavior may be a legitimate concern. In other instances, references to personal drug use or criminal behavior might be relevant. Imperative's professionally curated social media and web search product helps clients conduct necessary online due diligence while building guardrails around the process to ensure that irrelevant or potentially discriminatory information isn't provided to decision makers. You can learn more about the many ways Imperative helps our clients make well-informed decisions about the people they involve in their business at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 261 and enter the keyword triage. That's TRIAGE. Quick reminder that we're releasing a one-page discussion starter you can use with your HR or leadership team to consider the relevance of the information in this episode to your organization. The link is in the show notes. And now back to my conversation with Bernadette Jones. You're in California, I'm in Texas, probably polar as
Yes.
far as the amount, except that we both have plaintiffs' lawyers. And if that
Mhm.
employee feels like they weren't treated fairly, they'll go talk to a plaintiff's lawyer. And the plaintiff's lawyer will listen to their story. And the plaintiff's lawyer might say, it's not illegal to be a jerk. And that's just what it sounds like your boss was. But tell me about the rest of the employment stuff. And they're going to go mining through this history,
Yes.
looking for something that this employer did wrong. And when your
Mhm.
employees or your former employees are talking to a plaintiff's lawyer, it's way too late, right? Yeah, this is,
Yes.
and there are plaintiff lawyers who know that this especially larger company, they'll write $20,000 check just to make this go away. They're not, and so we'll file a demand letter or something, just make it go away. And there are people who make their living doing those things. And then as soon as you write that check, you've lost, not just because the case went away, but now the rest of the employees know.
Yes.
And they're always going to believe that you wrote that check because you did something wrong, even if it was just a nuisance suit and you're trying to get away. So there's no way you win those once it gets to that point. And so we've got I think patterns and data of what's happened previously and what is pointing to what's the core issue that this employee is dealing with, and what does the data say. It's so important to trying to figure out what the underlying issues really are.
Yes. And that is part of why I developed this framework. It's called the People Problem Triage Framework. And it's work that I've been doing for years, but just put it in a framework that makes it easy to follow. So when you have what you believe is a people problem, we start with that process. We talked about the triage, what's really going on, understanding that. The R is the risk. So identifying what are your risks? Is this the compliance? Is it culture? Then is identifying how to move forward with that, and then assessing what you already have. That's the A. Do you have documentation? Do you have other complaints? Do you have surveys? What do you have that can help you with this issue that's going on? And then the G is to get to the next step. So we always want to get to the next step. Make a decision about what that next step is that you're going to do within the next 7 days to address this problem. Is it have a conversation, right, with the manager? Is it don't say anything else? Bring in someone that's going to assist you because you're at a level that is riskier than others. And then go ahead and engage that and make the decisions and make sure that you move forward with the process. And sometimes we get stuck in analyzing, and we'll analyze and never actually move to the next step. And so that's what the people problem triage is designed to do. Walk you through each one of those steps in 20 minutes, and you will have your next step to move forward and addressing your people problem, your process problem, or your leadership problem.
And I didn't write all those down. So let's go to triage. I understand that. We understand that. Set how urgent is this? What's the immediate impact?
Right.
And then is the risk around, is like you said, is this a compliance issue or is it a culture issue? And if it's a compliance issue, we should fix it right away. If it's a culture issue, maybe we take a little bit more time to move through it. Maybe we've got a little bit more wiggle room because culture is what it is, and it's going to take a certain amount of effort to change it. Then what was I? Information, or what did you say it was?
The I is to identify who's impacted. Are there multiple employees? Is it a department? Is it even your customers or your clients that are being impacted by this situation? And then the A is to assess what you have. Do you have documentation? Do you have surveys? Do you have maybe written complaints?
Right. Witness, yeah.
Yes. And then once you have all that, G is get to a next step. That's critical. What's your next step? And within the next 7 days. So you put a time frame on that. It's not my next step and I take 2 months to do it. It's in the next 7 days. Am I going to have a conversation? Am I going to make sure that I don't have a conversation? Am I going to bring a third party in who can assist me? If I don't have an HR department, bring in HR counsel, consultant, or legal counsel. And then the E is finally is to engage that process. Make sure that you follow through and you do that next step. So that's the triage framework, and we've designed it to take 20 minutes to go through that framework. And that 20 minutes is going to allow you to rest and not sleep at night about this people, process, or leadership problem. But you've gotten to the next step and are able to move forward if that means assistance or if it means something that you can do on your own. And in that process, we help you determine if you need to bring in a third party or if it's something that you can do on your own.
So what are those criteria for determining when you bring somebody else out from the outside in, whether it's your HR consultant, your employment law, or whatever?
So you typically, that's going to be when you're looking at compliance issues. It's a compliance issue. It may be a legal issue. When folks are talking about hostile work environment, discrimination, all of those key clues that may have a legal issue. So those are definitely areas where you want to bring in help. A third party, maybe it's a third party who you just work with that assists you. And sometimes it may be something that you just want to turn over and you need to bring in a third party. And so you're not involved in the situation any longer.
The issue where somebody has made a complaint and your managers maybe think it's a big deal. It's a big deal because they're concerned. The employee has got a concern, but okay, what you're calling retaliation isn't illegal retaliation, right? Or what you're calling hostile work environment. Well, we're hostile towards it because you're being a jerk or whatever, or we don't like the way you work or whatever, but it's not based on any class. And so it's not illegal. And so sometimes managers, and I've met HR people who dismiss things when they hear those quasi
Right.
legal terms. And they're like, that's not what retaliation is. Well, legally, maybe it's not a retaliatory thing. But if we've got a culture where when people speak up or they say something, even if it's not a safety issue or a protected class issue or anything like that, they get shut down. That's going to turn into a legal retaliatory issue in the future because other employees are going to say, I know when I complain or bring up, management's not going to do anything. So if I've got a whole history of seeing that management doesn't care or giving that, they're not going to do anything. When a real, truly legal thing comes up, I may say, I'm going to deal with this some other way because I know management's not going to do anything. So I'm going to go file an EEOC charge or
Right.
whatever.
Exactly. And that's their story.
Right.
They don't have any other explanation. So that's their story. So it's so important to be clear about that. And the last thing not the last thing, but what you really want to consider is once you've handled whatever that is, you want to go back and reassess. So what impact did it have on our culture? Are people still talking about this? Is it a staff meeting that we need to have to quell concerns that people may have? Even though it's been addressed, everybody may not know that. And so there may need to be conversation around how this was handled or conversations around what the expectations are for our culture. So those conversations need to be had to make sure that whatever has happened has been repaired as best as possible.
I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago, back in May, called Managerial Discretion, Workplace Conflict, and it was about transparency and managing discretion or mitigating. I don't even know what I'm saying. I can't remember what the name of my managerial discretion in managing workplace gossip and issues. And so the whole issue was there's certain things managers will sometimes share too much information after the situation's been dealt
Yes.
and start to violate people's privacy a little bit
Mhm.
and overshare because they want to put oil on the water, right? And calm things down. And sometimes they share too much. But if they just say, no, we don't talk about that now, it's done. And so I have this approach that I try to use. It's like reassure them and redirect them. So reassure them, we followed the company policy. We made the decisions according to what policy was. We feel that everybody was treated with compassion and respect or whatever your other values are. And the best thing you can do as an employee, as a team, is do your job. But if you ever see behavior that's not appropriate, that's a violation of our policies or maybe illegal or unsafe, I want you to know, just like we did in this case, I want you to bring it to us because we want to take it seriously. And the company takes this information really serious so that employees don't think you're not taking it seriously. And they're like, okay, well, and they didn't tell us what's going on. So I can go safely make this complaint without them broadcasting it to everybody. So I don't have all coworkers judging me or talking my back or any of that stuff. So it's a balancing act between you can share and how much you don't.
Yes, it is. And I've answered this question many times with clients when there's been a sensitive issue that's happened, a well-liked employee resigns or someone is terminated and they're like, well, what can we tell them? They keep asking. And the answer always is that you cannot violate individual privacy. And this is so important that you really work on your culture because I typically work with organizations that are mission driven and really want to build great cultures. So if you're working toward building that culture, then it's easy for you to tell an employee, please trust that we made the right decision. Based on our culture, I'm asking that you trust that we made the right decision for everyone involved. And I can't share the details about that because that would be violating privacy. And I'm sure you wouldn't want us to violate your privacy. And so that is all that we can share. And most people are okay with that. Shuts it down when you ask them for that trust, but that's because you've worked on building that culture. Where people
You've
trust the
made
right
the
thing.
deposits in the months and years up to this point, so you've got credibility. You can't
Exactly.
decide in the middle of a conflict, we're going to change our culture. Now our new culture is this. That starts with leadership, and it takes a long time to turn that ship. And so you got to be investing early in that culture. Plus, it's just good business. You want people who are going to show up and give you that discretionary effort and do the work in a way that they feel like this is where I belong. And then when things go wrong, as they inevitably will, you're going to have conflict.
Right.
People expect and will give you the benefit of the doubt that you acted appropriately and fairly.
Right. That is why it's so important to have those quality conversations, give feedback that people can hear. Because when you're giving me feedback, on positive things that are working, it's easier for me to hear feedback for improvement. But if the only time we have a conversation is when there's a problem and you give me feedback, I'm not going to feel like you have my best interest because I know I'm doing something good or else I wouldn't
Right.
still be here. So if you're giving that positive feedback and feedback from for improvement, that really builds in your employees. It builds trust, and they feel more comfortable when you say, "Please trust that we made the right decision."
If you see your boss's phone number on your caller ID and you're, oh my gosh, and you don't even know what it's going to be about, but you just know it's not going to be a, hey, you did a great job on that project. That's not going to be
Mhm.
a good conversation.
Right. And one thing that I really have come to appreciate even more since COVID is that every one of us has some experience with work that may have caused us some trauma. Early on, it may have caused some workplace trauma. And since COVID, it has just been so evident. I get constant calls about mental health concerns with employees and stress and burnout. It's so much more than prior to COVID. And those workplace traumas, they come out. And so even if it isn't something that happened in the current job, it may be a past job. So people react because of something they experienced on a previous job. So sometimes we just have to pull back and think about, okay, why is this the reaction? And so when we're able to give that feedback and maybe you can find out if there's a particular reason why you're reacting when it's mystery may be that workplace trauma. And so I think it's more incumbent on employers now to be culture focused and to create some psychological safety where people are feeling comfortable enough to come to work and say, this is what's happening, give you feedback because you've given it to them and they feel that freedom. So that culture work is so important. It seems like a soft skill or warm and
But the soft
fuzzy.
skills are the hard skills, really.
They
And
are. It's not just a warm and fuzzy. It impacts your bottom line. And the better you are at that, the better your bottom line is.
and that is a perfect place to end it for today. Thank you for joining me, Bernadette. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Enjoyed talking with you.
And thanks again for serving your local and local HR community. That's near and dear to my heart.